What's up YouTube, ODST General back again, and today guys we have another Intersystem news. There's a lot of stuff to talk about guys, most of that's not going to be talked about here. In fact, there's only going to be one mod covered today because this is a big announcement I've been waiting over a year to tell you guys about. And there is a lot of work to do for the other mods in terms of getting stuff put together, collecting information, editing images, recording audio, all that stuff. This is going to be a much easier video for me. In fact, there is very, very little information for me to share with this mod still at this point in time. But with that being said, I'm still probably going to ramble on a little bit just because I want to talk about this mod. I'm kind of having to hold myself back a lot with the information I do know, just because there's still a lot of work in progress stuff that's very prone to changing, and I've been asked not to talk about that stuff until it's more solidified and the developers are sure that that is the direction they want to go with those assets and the like. So the Cole Protocol, TCP, has finally announced publicly that it exists. Now, TCP has been a very poorly kept secret in the community for a while now. It's been teased in the Operation Trebuchet Discord as well as other community Discords, by members of both their team to a smaller extent, but also a number of community members who are already aware of it. And it's gone public. A number of images were shared of various 3D renders, primarily of handheld weapons. So what is TCP? Well, I can't talk a lot about the exact details of the mod, but what I can tell you is it is a standalone mod in the same vein as Operation Trebuchet and what Far Isle has planned. Which is to say, it is a mod that will include as much as many Halo assets as they can get out to you guys, with their team. And of course, fits the mod. So this isn't going to be just a couple of guns here or there, just one and done type of thing. It's going to be a lot of different assets. So the question, of course, usually kind of stems from that. What's the difference between this and Operation Trebuchet? Well, of course, there is, the typical story that most development teams have, which is you have creative differences and stuff, which is part of the decision that led to a creation of a separate team. There was also some other projects that this team wanted to potentially pursue, and that's something they've talked about a little bit. I'm not really privy to those details, so unfortunately I'm not going to get into that at all. As far as I know, some of that stuff's not even Halo related. But with that being said, the biggest difference for you guys on your end as the end user would be probably one of quality. That's going to be really what sets this mod aside from, something like Operation Trebuchet. And that's not to say Operation Trebuchet is a really poor quality mod, but there is definitely some very aged assets, we'll put it that way. And, with a lot of the bigger developers from Operation Trebuchet, the ones who did a lot of the models and stuff, kind of having gone inactive, contributing the most models and stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of those assets probably aren't likely to be updated, and even if those developers were to go back, they'd probably just completely scrap those assets and redo them from the ground up in all likelihood. So we're getting a lot of older assets. We're still getting a lot of stuff from Operation Trebuchet, but it's not necessarily the best quality that they would be capable of putting out if they had their full development power that they maybe had, say, 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago even. But there's been a lot of development in terms of how things are developed for Arma 3 since then, and the developers behind the Cole Protocol include a number of former Operation Trebuchet developers as well as various other community members, and they've learned a lot about modding for Arma 3 and really getting the best results for their assets when they get in game. It does usually mean that these assets take a little bit longer for them to produce. But with that being said, they are much more faithful not only to the actual Halo games and, the designs that they're basing this stuff off of in most cases, but also when you look at the 3D render, and this is something that stands true not just of Arma assets, but really any asset for any sort of game mod. When you look at a 3D render, usually the 3D render will look really gorgeous, and then you get it into a game, and it just doesn't hold up because You have a number of differences for things like lighting and material effects and stuff, and how those are handled in the 3D rendering software versus the game. Very oftentimes, very dramatically, and so you'll get something that looks really great as a 3D render, which doesn't necessarily look bad as a 3D model in game, but doesn't look nearly as good as what it did as a 3D render. And in the case of Black Elements, the Call Protocol, what you see in the 3D render is very, very close to what you get in game. There's, you know, a little bit difference, but for the most part, it is very similar looking, as you guys will see with these images and stuff. So I think that when you ask what the big difference is, what's the benefit of using this versus Operation Trebuchet, obviously there's going to also be stuff like, you know, statistical differences with weapons, number of rounds, fire rates, scatter, stuff like that. The biggest difference is going to be one of quality, and I would say probably just trying to stay as accurate and faithful to the Halo games as possible. So again, I can't really share any fine details. I can't tell you guys when this is coming out. You know, I can't tell you any of those exact details on the fire rates or, you know, particular round counts on any of the guns, anything like that. If the developers wish to answer any of those questions, you guys are more than welcome to ask them in the comments. And, you know, the developers may answer, they may not. I can't promise or tell you anything in that regard, but of course, feel free to ask away, and maybe somebody is inclined to answer. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff. There's going to be more stuff than what you guys are actually seeing in here, and you do get a little bit of a taste of some of the in-game assets. Like I said, most of these are 3D. There's a couple of 2D concepts for some stuff that they've looked at doing, not necessarily stuff that they're going to do for sure. Things like the Pelican, obviously, are very likely to be done. You know, things like the MA2B, the M6J, you know, the M73, you know, kind of less canon designs. Maybe those are going to get done. I mean, that's definitely something that I think the developers would like to do. But of course, stuff like that may be a little less likely. So when you see those 2D concepts, there's probably a good chance that the developers want to do them, but just bear in mind that that doesn't necessarily mean those are going to be weapons that are going to be getting completed. Yeah, so I don't really know what else to talk about with this. There's more I know. There's other assets that I've seen that aren't included in here. Some of the assets I've seen included in here, and I can't say which ones, are further along and nicer looking than what they look like in here. And again, you guys are just getting a very small tease of what this mod will ultimately be some point down the road. So I will leave this off like this, and it's the same as every other video. What were you guys most excited from for today's video? And what would you guys like to see the most in this mod? They're going initially kind of reach heavy aesthetic, very similar to Operation Trebuchet. With that being said, they are open to developing other eras of Halo, and that is planned. There's a good chance that if you guys ask for something, it's something that they've probably already considered. Chances are, if you guys will ask for anything in particular, you know, that it's not necessarily going to be addressed directly, or no guarantee that's going to be done. In fact, it's probably not likely, but I always do encourage you guys to ask, because sometimes there's just one of those like weird assets that nobody really thought of or considered, and then a developer goes, yeah, that would actually be really cool to add. So, you know, of course, I do encourage you guys to let us know what you'd want to see in the mod, and by us, I mean them. So, alright guys, that's going to be it for today's video. I appreciate you all watching. Again, there is a lot more stuff to talk about in terms of modding stuff for Halo and Arma. There's Operation Trebuchet updates we need to talk about. Web Knight's been doing some crazy stuff with the Covenant. You know, the 19th is added again, so just a lot of major things on the horizon, and some stuff that's already dropped that I haven't had a chance to talk about. So, really excited to share all that stuff with you guys in due time. Until then, guys, thank you all for watching. Take it easy. I'll see you all in the next one.